This is a detailed review of the Uni-T UT61E. There are I believe five multimeters in the UT61 series A through E. This is basically the highest one in the range. There's one right below it that's a pretty decent multimeter that would be a good alternative if you weren't able to get this one wherever you live, or at least, you know, for a good price, and it's the D model. But the specs do drop significantly going down from this model. But that being said, though, you do also gain backlight, though, going from this model down to the D model. But if you can afford it and you can live without a backlight, this one is incredible value for the money, and that's why I kind of chose it. I hate just giving a single multimeter an overall winner, because it really depends on what you're doing. For example, I would not recommend this if you were gonna go probing high energy stuff once in a while. In that case, I'd probably recommend the amp probe or the fluke probably. But if it's just gonna be what I would call a bench queen, a multimeter that sits in your nice, clean, dust-free, climate-controlled, air-conditioned lab, then it's really not. It doesn't matter. And in that case, this multimeter is miles ahead of those, in my opinion, just for general use. Assuming that you get a good one and, you know, everything is within its rated spec, and as you'll see a little later, this one really is. It's a great meter. It actually surprised me. I've never owned a Uni-T model until I bought the two for the $50 multimeter shootout. And the thing I was most impressed about, I know that you can buy cheap multimeters. There's a million rebranded cheap multimeters from China all over eBay, Amazon, you know, everywhere. The one thing they all have in common, though, they all feel like they're very cheap. They come with really terrible manuals. I don't know. They just feel horrible. They feel like they're gonna fall apart in your hands. And the first thing I noticed about the Uni-Ts, despite being cheap and despite being Chinese, they feel great. This actually is probably one of the higher quality feeling ones, and I'm talking just physical feel, objective feel. You put it in your hands, the ruggedness, the quality of the materials, the smoothness of the plastic, the quality of the silk screening. It looks really nice. Now the probes would be the cheapest part of the entire thing, but the manual it comes with, unfortunately, is all Chinese, but it's really good quality. You can still use it to look up, you know, its accuracies and specs and such, but it comes with a CD, and I would imagine on the little mini CD it probably has all languages. But if you get on their website, they have the English manual, and it is actually very, very good. It is actually among one of the best. If they had printed that version and put it in the packaging, it would be one of the better manuals of the bunch. But you can get this one on Amazon for about $49. I paid $48.99, and it was Prime, so, you know, free 2-day shipping to my door. That's in the US. Obviously, it could be a different situation if you live in a different country. I'm not sure how Amazon works in other countries. But I would imagine no matter where you live, you can probably get this for around $50, even, you know, if you're in Europe or Australia or wherever. The impressive thing about this, despite being under $50, it's 22,000 counts display resolution. As you can see, there are lots of digits. You can see it obviously needs a little more shielding. As my hand gets close to it, you can see it affecting the reading a little bit. But its accuracy is also one of the best. Actually, I think it is the best of the bunch. It's 0.1% plus 2 counts, and that is really good. And so, obviously, if it's 22,000 counts and it was only 0.5%, it wouldn't be quite as good. But 0.1% plus 2 counts for 22,000 count display resolution, that's a pretty good matchup. And yeah, it's for the money, it's incredible that you can spend less than $50 shipped to your door, no tax. Well, again, that depends on your country, but if you're in the US, you know, depending on the state you live in. Unfortunately, I live in a state that happens to have an Amazon distribution center, so if it's shipped from that distribution center, I'm pretty sure I get taxed. But for most states, still, online is still a tax-free thing. And yeah, under $50, completely shipped into your door, is incredible for a 22,000 count meter, and one that's actually of this quality. Now, you know, if you look at the raw specs, that the hold peak one for $27 seems incredible until you realize that it's just a plastic pile of crap. It really is junk, and you feel the quality difference too, and it even looks cheap when you put it next to this one, for example. The measurement capabilities are also equally impressive. It'll measure frequency up to 220 megahertz. That is truly impressive. That actually could get a lot of people by without having to buy a frequency counter for a while. Now, generally though, you know, you buy a frequency counter, those things will go way up there. The one I have will go up to 3.5 gigahertz. So, I mean, obviously it's not a substitute for that, but until you can afford one, this will get you by up to 220 megahertz, and that's pretty impressive. It'll measure capacitance to 220,000 microfarad, or I guess it would be 220 millifarad, which is impressive. That's actually, I believe that's higher than my Agilent LCR will go, and we might actually test that. So I always say there's not a single perfect multimeter out there. Every multimeter has its faults. Even the venerable Fluke 87.5 has its faults. For one, it's starting to show its age. It's accurate, reliable, has the name brand behind it, but it is starting to fall behind in features and such. But it's still one of my favorite meters, so I don't want to make it sound like I'm trash talking the thing, but all meters have their faults, and this one has a couple. First, this one does not have a backlight at all. It's not even an option for this. If you get the D model, it does have a backlight, but for this one, where the backlight button is on the D model, it's actually the secondary select, which is actually just for frequency and duty cycle. So it's I would rather them get rid of the hold button, which is pretty worthless on all these because it's not the fancy Fluke type auto hold or touch hold. So yeah, if that were a backlight, that would have been a lot better. That would make this even better than it already is. And hey, maybe they'll make an F model someday and give it a backlight. Oh, and another thing, this one doesn't measure temperature. While it is handy, and I've actually used the multimeter's capability of measuring temperature in the past, I don't think it's a big deal not to have it. Yeah, so to lose the accuracy, the build quality, and the impressive display resolution, to me is not worth it going to one of the other models in the shootout, if this is just going to be just a general bench use multimeter. Okay, so as far as packaging, actually here, it comes in a retail box like this, and it's a generic box that all the 61 models use, and then on the end of the box they just put a little check mark. This is obviously a box for a D. I accidentally ordered two, but I think I'm going to give this to one of my friends. But it's a nice, decent color retail package. I really don't have any problems with that. And let's see, it comes with this little device. So, well, it's okay. See, I see the letter K here. So I think maybe on the A through C models, maybe they have one of those will have temperature capability. And I think one of the lower ones also has transistor testing, gain testing, which is probably what those are for. And actually, probably what those are for too, if you have SMD ones. But I think the big thing though, what you could use this for would be, wait, why would this go? I actually don't know what this would be for, because you'd be able to put resistors and or capacitors into here, but this bridges between the current or common, and obviously if you're measuring capacitance or resistance, you'd have to plug it into this one, and if you plug it into this one, it can't reach the common jack, so I'm actually kind of confused as to what the hell why did they include this? This meter I don't think has any, I don't see anything on here that I would be able to use this for, so that's actually really bizarre, and I'm surprised I didn't notice that the first time, because when I reviewed this, I don't know if I showed this, maybe that's why, I don't, it's very interesting, but it includes it. It's pretty much worthless on this meter as far as I can see, unless there's something blatantly obvious and the viewers are all yelling at me right now. Another awesome thing, it comes with, well, it could be more awesome. It'd be more awesome if this were USB on this end instead of DB connector, but you can't get everything. It comes with an IR receiver that you pull the plug out and then you slide this into there. Get your good old RS-232 communication action going on. And so obviously it's optically isolated from whatever you're measuring, which is good. Does this do send and receive? I see there's at least a lens for both. I don't know if the PCB has send and receive IR, but I don't know. I guess if I can remember, we'll take a look at that when we open it up. I don't honestly remember, but it does include the cable. A lot of companies will include a lot of money for this, and in fact, if you've ever looked at pricing for Gauss and Metrowatt stuff, their cable kit costs more than like 6 of these multimeters combined. It's really insane. Here's the CD that includes user manual, and considering I see multimeter software on here, actually that might not have the manual. That might just be the data logging software. You would think they would put the manual in there too, because you know this has tons of room left on it, even after burning their stuff on there. Warranty registration card thing. Obviously this is the one for the D, but the contents were identical in both packages, so it didn't really matter which baggie I grabbed. I put these in lunch bags to keep all the contents of the boxes separated, because with 15 multimeters it's really hard to keep track of everything. So yeah, and here's the extremely nice manual if I spoke Chinese, but I don't, so unfortunately it doesn't do me any good. But they have this, basically the exact thing in English on their website, and it is a very, very good manual. I mean, it shows you how to do everything. And so for beginners, this would actually be pretty good. And it's really detailed, and it's got all the specs, and I like it. But obviously the one they includes the Chinese manual, so yeah. Not a bad thing though. The obviously the spec charts, the labels for them are in Chinese, but obviously the numbers are numbers, so you can tell. I mean, without knowing Chinese, you'd be able to tell what the basic DC accuracy and all that stuff is without a problem. Or you can just go to the website and download it. Physical build quality, probably my single favorite thing about this. It just feels like it really does. It feels like a premium multimeter. If you don't believe me, buy one or go borrow a friend's and hold one for yourself. It just feels, I mean, I'm putting a ton of force on that, and there's not a single creak, not even the tiniest bit of flex. It is rock solid. And aesthetically speaking, I mean, this is more of a subjective thing, but I think it's a pretty nice looking multimeter myself. It doesn't have a separate holster. It's Uni-T always does the ones that are molded into the chassis, but it's a really, really smooth, slightly rubberized plastic, and it's pretty grippy and it feels good. Obviously this isn't going to protect it like, you know, a really big beefy holster like the Klein has, or like the UEI, or like the Fluke, for example. So this wouldn't be the, you know, the rugged type of meter you'd take outside and throw it around and throw it in your toolbox, but yeah, it's really not that bad though. And kickstand. I like the kickstand design on this, I really do. It's really wide, it's extremely easy to get out. It fits flush, which adds to the aesthetics. It looks really nice, and extremely easy to pull out. I hate the ones that have some kind of tab that snaps in and it makes it really hard to pull out. This one's really easy to get out, and it feels pretty sturdy. I mean, within reason. You know, like I always say, if you anything will break with enough force eventually, but it's really stable. It's kind of like the Amprobe was. It's really wide. The bottom of the meter is relatively flat. I mean, it's rounded in this direction, but not so much in that direction. So I can change the ranges without the whole thing wobbling back and forth like it does with a lot of the smaller meters. And I can push the buttons, and these are actually really stiff buttons compared to a lot of the other ones. You actually have to give them a pretty good amount of force for them to depress. And due to the way they design the kickstand, you know, the pivoting position and how far back it leans and the width and everything, they design it to where you can push these all day long and it's probably never going to fall back. So kickstand, excellent. Probes would be my single biggest gripe about the unit, I would think. It's just typical Uni-T. They're just really cheap and plasticky feeling. And they're very sharp though, very, very sharp. I don't know if you can really... I always do this. I don't know if you can actually end up seeing how sharp they are, but they feel great. They're very, very pointy and sharp. And finger guards are mediocre. It's not rubberized, so you don't feel like you get a good grip on them. I mean, it's still got the ridges here for grip, but yeah, and the strain relief is very minimal, so not that great, but they'll get the job done though. But pointiness good, handle quality not great, strain relief mediocre, and yeah, no ratings or anything on the cables that I can see, but then again, Fluke doesn't do that either, so I don't know if that really means much. And their jacks are interesting. They're not completely 90 degrees. They come out a little bit, and I actually like that because when you put them in your multimeter and it's sitting on a kickstand back on the bench, if they were directly 90 degrees, your cables come straight down into the bench. But since these come out at a more of a shallow angle, they come out almost, not completely, but almost flush with your workbench, and it puts less strain on the strain relief on your the actual plug. So I honestly like it like this, but some people don't like the non 90 degree ones, but yeah, I understand why they do it. It makes sense to me, but it's one of those personal preference things. I don't mind it, but the probes overall feel kind of cheap and cheesy, but $12 will get you an awesome set of aftermarket probes, such as a Probe Master, so easily fixed. Let's talk about the range switch. Obviously, this is another thing that's, unless it's just horrendous, it's really not a big deal. This is more of a personal preference thing. It's like a silver lining. It's like a good multimeter, but an excellent range switch just makes it even better. And it's so different from all the other ones. It's hard to explain. It's still a really good amount of force. It's really notchy, but it's more fluid and smooth. And as you can tell, it's very quiet compared to a lot of the other ones. It's basically the opposite of the Klein. The Klein one is just super loud and clunky. But out of all of them, this feels... It's a little smoother than the... I don't know, does it feel smoother? It's hard to say. The BK one has a good, that ball bearing feel, because I believe it does have ball bearings inside instead of just the plastic nubs that go into the detents. This one has like a hydraulic feel to it, and it's if I had to describe it, this is kind of like the luxury car HVAC selector in a luxury car, where just everything just has a really nice feel to it. That's kind of how I could describe it. But range switch is very good in my opinion. And as far as being able to get it stuck between ranges, not really. It feels like it's almost mushy in the middle, but as soon as you get to a certain point, it just sucks it into the next range. So yeah, I don't think you would ever have a problem with that. And on top of that, it feels great. And for some reason, the D model that I got should be, I mean, it looks identical. I think it is identical. It feels even better, and I think it might have to do with the grease they put in there. Maybe that one just got extra grease on accident, and it feels really hydraulic and awesome. But range switch, freaking awesome. But again, that's a subjective thing. Most people don't care. So, capabilities, because, well, that's important. What can the meter do for you? It'll do voltage, AC or DC shared in one range. I personally am not a fan of that, but it works. This one defaults to DC, which is good for electronics hobby type of work. And then you use the blue button to switch between AC and DC. And then you can hit the yellow button to read frequency or duty cycle while you're in any of these ranges. And then you have the millivolt range, which is also excellent for electronics work. And then you have resistance, continuity, and diode check in one range. You use the blue button to switch between them, but that's, I don't know why I'm explaining that. Everyone knows how that works. You have capacitance range. Actually, the beeping is bugging me. You have frequency measurement, and then if you hit the yellow button, you can switch to duty cycle. And then you have your current measurement ranges, and they're AC and DC shared. Hit the blue button to switch between them. Looks like it defaults to DC, which is really, for electronics work, could be good. I'm sure industrial use would be better the other way around. So it has hold, but unfortunately it's the type that just freezes whatever reading happens to be on the screen. But the bar graph doesn't freeze, which seems to be how most multimeters behave, which is really bizarre. But to me, that's not very handy. And to most people, I would imagine that that's never used. It's just like the manufacturers put that on there because if they don't, then the other manufacturers can say, hey, look, we have hold, and they don't. Manual ranging, which is handy for certain situations, but again, not a make or break thing, but it's definitely nice to have it. Especially because if you use rel, a lot of multimeters, if you use relative function, it locks you into the current range that you're in. So if you try to measure without manually going to the correct range, it'll say overload. And that's extremely annoying, but unfortunately, the majority of multimeters behave in that manner. And so just something you have to know. But yeah, because of that though, it's really good to have a manual ranging button so you can get around that. Figure out what range you need to be in, manually go to it, then rel out your residual capacitance or, you know, the resistance of your probes or whatever you need to rel out. Peak. I believe this peak works in the same manner that the peak worked on the south wire, where you hook it up into your circuit, whatever voltage you're currently measuring. You let the reading settle, and then you push and hold it until it says cal. Well, let's see. Yeah, it's identical. And then, excuse me. Yeah, peak max, peak min, and it'll just show you the max and minimum peaks. Now I don't know how many milliseconds or microseconds peaks this is able to detect. I didn't actually see that in the manual. I should probably download, maybe some point during this review I'll head to the computer and pull up the manual and see if it says. But it could be handy for certain situations. And it is starting to storm. Hopefully the power doesn't go out while I'm doing this. And that's really all the functionality. These two buttons are just secondary functions. So yeah, I do wish I had a backlight, but truth be told, I have never needed a backlight on a multimeter ever. Now, while doing reviews, sometimes the lighting wasn't quite right, so it was nice to be able to turn it on to make it show up better on the camera. But yeah, that rain is going to be loud and annoying. I have a feeling. So is the thunder. So sorry if that's coming. If you can hear the storm in the audio. Yeah, but anyway, that's its capabilities. I guess I should mention the display. Uni-Ts are known for having really good displays, and as you can see, it has extremely good contrast. The update rate seems to be pretty decent, but obviously that'll be different in the different ranges, I would imagine. It has a really nice bar graph with pretty good resolution to it. It says manu, which could be kind of confusing. That actually just stands for manual. It means we're not... Why? Oh, okay, so when you switch it... I'm curious... Yeah, okay, so if you're in just regular volts mode, it'll auto range down to millivolts. But if you switch it to millivolts, it forces you manually into the millivolt range, I guess. Well, maybe this doesn't... Well, I mean, it's got the resolution to show you down to millivolts. Actually, down to hundreds of microvolts, but... it's really interesting. But yeah, overall the display is great. It would just be a little bit better if it included backlight. But like I said, no multimeter is perfect. This had to have something wrong with it, and in this case it's the lack of a backlight. But what can you do? Oh, and if you're the hacking type, you really like to modify things and really get under the hood and work on stuff, there are tons of tutorials online from different people on how to add backlights to this multimeter, and some of them are actually pretty cool, and they seem like they're not too hard to do. Some of them are a little more difficult to do, but some of them are pretty clever. There's a recent one that was on Hackaday. It's a touch mod, but you'll just have to go Google search it and you'll find it. That's if you need one. I've never really needed one. I always have really good lighting. If I'm at my bench, I've got lighting from my mag lamp. I've got the lighting that I put, the LED lights I put underneath the instrument rack on my bench, and then I got the lighting in the room, so it's perfectly fine. I think it's time to check out the battery and fuse situation. I'm gonna be so mad if I finish recording this and realize that I'm really hard to hear because of the storm. I'm using a really good quality Shure microphone. So hopefully, since it's, you know, directional, the storm won't. It'll pick up my voice more so than the storm, but we'll find out. So right off the bat, I like the battery compartment design. It breaks my heart that they had to use a self-tapper, something that you'd have to replace somewhat often, and they use a stupid plastic self-tapping screw. That being said, though, the kickstand comes off with the battery. They have a nice piece of foam down there to keep the battery snug, and then the size of the slots up here are different sizes, which basically, you know, makes it polarized. You can only plug the battery in one direction, so you don't accidentally plug it in with reverse polarity. Man, that thunder is going crazy. Yeah, and it doesn't use a battery snap. I love that. I hate battery snaps. This uses proper battery terminals, and yeah, that is so much better. So kudos to them for that. Slight thumbs down for lack of fuse access, but it's like 90% of multimeters are like that. So yeah, I can't complain too much about that. And I believe to get it open, it's just these two screws, so let me go ahead and pop those out. Okay, so I got those two screws out, and they're just regular self-tappers, and I believe that's all it takes to pull this multimeter apart, if I remember correctly. Holy cow, that was loud. And I believe it just has some hinges on the top, so you just, there you go. Yeah, it comes right out. So, first thing you notice, they somewhat care. If they didn't care, they wouldn't go through the trouble of putting shielding. So, you know, they put a little effort into this. And really the only other thing to see, well, obviously they have the exposed side of the foil tape folded over, and I'm guessing there's a spring, yep, right here, that contacts it. And then the only other thing to see on this side of the board is, or the chassis, is the lens for the IR. And there are the internals. So the first thing, it's a little lackluster, the tiny little fuses they put in here. I don't, maybe if I can get it out I can see what the rating is. Asia fuse does not instill a lot of confidence in me, and it doesn't have voltage rating, so your guess is as good as mine. Okay, here's the 10 amp one, and still no voltage rating, so yeehaw. Good news though, at least they're ceramic type, and they do have the little nubs on the ends, so they can't vibrate out of their fuse holder and cause problems. So, as you can see, the inside of this is very familiar to, was it the amp probe? I think it was. I can't remember now. Yeah, I think it was the amp probe. Had almost identical, no, actually, I'm going to stop talking because I really honestly don't remember which one this is similar to, but 10 amp current shunt actually looks pretty good. Those are all 3 PTCs, and there's an isolation slot that goes down the middle there between the two legs of each one. There's some type of isolation going on right here. And that's about it. And yeah, there's some unpopulated goods right there, but I think they have different models for different markets to pass specifications to be able to import them legally, I guess. And the battery terminals are soldered on, and those are the very tough type where each tab gets 2 tabs, or each battery terminal gets 2 tabs, so they're very, very sturdy and rugged. All the components seem to be of pretty good higher quality. You have the nice aluminum electrolytics. You got a precision resistor network with shielding around it, which is good. And you don't see that in the D model, but the D model is really inferior in specs compared to this one. Kind of a cheapo trim pot there. Big speaker, and yeah, this one's only send, IR send, so it happens to have the lens for send and receive, but apparently it's only doing sending. And yeah, there's not really a lot going on this sucker. But everything, in my opinion, looks pretty clean and tidy. And it's got really good blast protection. It's got It's got 2 channels. Man, that storm is gnarly. So this is the back of the case. You see a really, really deep channel, and it fits between the 2 on the top side, which is, it's good, and most multimeters do it this way, but figured I'd mention that it looks really good, and so you have good 3 layers of protection, and I think due to it being really round, maybe that, and it being really deep, adds to the rigidity, because it only has 2 screws holding the whole thing together. And so for only having 2 screws holding together, this thing just feels super, super rugged. But as far as how it would do in a drop test, we'll find out. I really don't know. Huh. It's really interesting to see what that looks like due to the frequency of my light flickering. Sorry, getting distracted. Man, I'm contemplating stopping the recording and picking up after the storm stops, because I don't want to lose my audio from my computer shutting down from the power going out. I have it plugged into a UPS, but it's old enough now that I don't think it would keep my computer up long enough for me to run over there, and I don't know. Don't know. Well, I guess I'll take my luck. I'm going to go ahead and pull the rest of these screws out, and then we'll see what's going on the bottom side. Okay, so I've learned from taking all these other multimeters apart that top screws are usually going into the LCD housing, so the only screw holding the whole thing in was a single one right down here. And it comes out. And that's an amazing thing. 2 screws to take the entire chassis apart, 1 screw to take the PCB out, and it still feels that rigid and sturdy. I don't know how they do it, but they did something right. And there's the inside. Nothing too out of the ordinary. And here's the front of the PCB. And really, there's not a lot to the front. I'm going to go ahead and, well, yeah, we can't see the main processor. I'm going to go ahead and pull these 2 screws out, and then we'll take a peek under the LCD assembly. Okay, so I pulled both the screws out, so I think this will lift off now. Yep. Yeah, and look at that. That looks identical to the back of the amp probe one, if I remember correctly. I think it was the amp probe. Yeah, I believe it was the amp probe that looked like this. And so that shielding that comes around the side is also from, it's the same contiguous piece from the back of the LCD display. And it looks like the zebra strip is stuck pretty good to the board. I'm not going to pull it off though. And there's a spring. I'm guessing that contacts the shielding on the front side, the part that goes around the LCD. And lots of tiny SMD goodness going on the front. And there's our, okay, will that focus? There's our Cyrus Tech ASIC. So the good news is they have a lot of isolation stuff going around right around the shielded resistor network. So, you know, they're putting some thought into this. So it shows you, though, that this can't be too terrible. I know a lot of people just have something against Uni-T, and some of it's for good reason, but all in all, though, it seems like their quality has improved. I've seen some teardown pictures of some really early models from, you know, 4 or 5 years ago. And the ones I have 4 total. I keep hearing something. It actually could be my UPS clicking over. But yeah, from teardown pictures I've seen from other people's older models, all 4 of the ones I've had in my hands seem to be miles better. So they've either made improvements or they've listened and seen the reviews and made the changes, and really honestly I don't have too many complaints with this. Considering this is under $50 to my door, that's incredible. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to get you a really good clear shot of both sides. Okay, and then good money shot of the backside. So yeah, all in all, it's really not that terrible. It'd be nicer to see the bigger sized ceramic fuses, but I mean, at least they're ceramic, and it'd be nice to see name brand fuses in there. Obviously, you could replace them yourself, so that's not too big of an issue. And why is my camera not focusing? There we go. Sorry about that. Yeah. Really, the only thing that stands out as being a little weird is this. Man, what is with the? I think it's the harsh light of bringing my light closer. It made it hard for my camera to focus. But this cap does not seem to be the correct package size. That's really the only thing that kind of stands out. Maybe the correct package size wasn't sufficient, so they had to upgrade to it. Don't know, but either way, I just had to point that out. And there are some trimmers on here, but not as many as a lot of the other ones. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that a trimmer? Maybe, I can't tell. And then I guess that's technically a trimmer too. So yeah, I guess it does have a bunch of trimmers. But the good news is there's documentation from people on the forums. There's huge threads where people calibrate these themselves, and they'll point out which trimmers do what. So if you get one and it's a little out of whack, or if you just want to get it dialed right in perfectly, you can go pull one of those threads up and do it yourself. And there's nothing wrong with doing a little DIY. The input jacks, probably the only thing I haven't really mentioned. They're the really cheap split tube type, and I mean, they work, but yeah, that's okay. That's, you know, about half of the manufacturers do it this way, so can't really knock them for it when they're not the only ones that do it. So, but all in all, it doesn't look terrible. I'm not endorsing you to go out and probing high energy stuff with this, because you'll probably just get yourself killed. But it doesn't seem too bad. It seems a lot better than a lot of the other teardown pictures that I've seen. I guess that's all I'm really trying to say. And for the money, it's not that bad at all. And just like I say every time, it looks like gold plating, but I honestly have not a clue. So if anyone knows of a good way of testing that, let me know. So I'm gonna go ahead and reassemble it, and then I think we should take some measurements with it and see if this is a good meter for $48. All right, it's time to measure some voltages, DC in this case, just for comparison's sake. Okay, so I'm going to plug the fluke into the same 5-volt reference. So there's a 4.999, occasionally flopping to an 8. Now on the Uni-T, 4.999. So, yeah. Okay, let's do 10 volts. Right on the money. Which is awesome. And on the fluke. There's a discrepancy. I think I'm gonna turn on my bench supply, or my bench, my 6.5 digit meter, just to see which one is correct. So this is interesting. So that is what my 6.5 digit Agilent bench multimeter says that my reference should be. 10.00001. Okay, And now we'll plug the fluke in. And now we'll plug the Uni-T in. So in this case, the Uni-T is closer. So that shows you though, you know, it's really accurate. And considering that it's $48, yeah, and I'm not saying, this happens to be down here on the surface of my bench. I'm not saying that this is a better multimeter than this necessarily. I'm just saying that, man, what did I pay for this? It's probably, when I got it, I think it was probably $350, $400, maybe more when I got this. And actually, I think it was more because I got the little probe set with it. It came with a little leather bag and a little thing that rolls up that has all the different types of probes in it. So I paid quite a bit for this. This is not even $50. So yeah, just to compare against a high-end meter, it's pretty dang accurate. So I do want to see though what my bench Agilent meter says for the 5-volt reference. There we go. Sorry about the crappy focusing and crappy camera work by myself. Okay, so you saw it was $4,999. Here's the fluke. Of course, it's not focused. And here's the Uni-T again. Actually, did I not have the fluke in high res? Yeah. So for the 5-volt one, the fluke's reading much closer, but the 10-volt one is out just a hair, and this one was basically dead on for both. So Uni-T, freaking good job. Let's do a continuity test. Now, if you subscribe to my channel and you've seen my older videos, you've probably seen the video where I did a continuity test on this multimeter using these crappy stock probes versus the aftermarket gold-plated ProbeMasters, and you'll know that there's a huge difference. But I'll demonstrate the same in case anyone watching this review hasn't seen that video. So here are the stock probes, and it's on continuity mode. Did you hear any beeping? Because I sure didn't. Okay, now I'm going to plug in these nice aftermarket ProbeMaster probes. I can't, if this is out of focus, I'm sorry. I've been trying, and for some reason my camera's not wanting to focus tonight. Well, it seems a little better, but okay, so same multimeter, still in continuity mode. I adjusted the lighting because I can't get the stupid thing to focus very well, or at least to my eyes it doesn't look focused. There, maybe that's better. So aftermarket probes. So the continuity test on here is excellent if you buy aftermarket probes. Now, it's still good with stock probes, just not that quick. So I got the stock probes plugged back in and watch. But if you're actually using these to probe with, it's really not that bad, to be honest. It's just, you saw how huge of a difference it makes if you get just this, and those ProbeMasters, they're only $12, so it's not like you have to spend a whole lot of money to get a good set of probes. Let's go ahead and test auto ranging of resistance mode. Here we go. Man, I forgot how quick this is. So that might be the quickest auto ranging in resistance I have of all my meters, I think. The fluke and my Agilent might be close to this, maybe even quicker, I don't know. But off the top of my head, this is one of the quickest that I have for sure. I mean, look at that. We're going from mega ohms, and this will go up to 220 mega ohms. all the way down to its lowest range that fast. So auto ranging for resistance mode is really impressive. Now let's check out the display update rate. At least in mega ohms, it looks like it's like 2, yeah, about 2 a second, which is normal. It could be better, but at least for this range. Now, that's the thing with most multimeters. Different ranges have different auto range, or not auto range, different display update rates, as well as different measurement types. So for voltage, or even for lower ranges and resistance, the update rate could be a lot quicker. As you can see, the bar graph is lightning fast. Let's go ahead and check its current measurement capabilities. And this is a 1 milliamp reference, so that is pretty darn close. Not as accurate as the voltages were, but, well, actually, I do have my 6.5 digit bench meter still turned on, so we'll see what it says. Oh, actually, so the 6.5 digit bench meter is saying 0.9999, so 4 nines after the decimal point. Yeah, so this is a hair out, but I mean, yeah, it's pretty darn close. But not as accurate as its voltage measurement capabilities, apparently. And I guess I didn't mention, but you can see it as true RMS. Okay, let's do its diode testing capabilities. Okay, so I have a bright white higher power LED here. And as always, I'll just say the reason I do this is they add diode testing capability for testing silicone diodes, but a lot of the new multimeters have a high enough voltage and current in diode test mode that you can light up an LED, so it's a good way to test an LED. And as you can see, it lights it up. Doesn't show voltage on the screen though, but I would imagine that with this red LED, it'll do both. Yep. So excellent, very good. The only way it would be better is if it showed a voltage for the bright white LED, but at least it lit it up so you can just test to see if they're working. Okay, I think it's time to test capacitance, and the capacitance measurement range on this is insane, but we're going to test something that the other multimeters have not been able to do, and it's measured down to the picofarad range. Alright. Yeah. No go for picofarad, but I'm sure 100 nano would be fine. Yep. Okay, and then we have a 1000 microfarad electrolytic. Wow, that is freaking fast. But yeah, let's try that again. So I'm gonna short it, and then we're gonna measure it again. That has got to be the fastest capacitor measurement I've ever seen. In fact, I think that blows my Agilent LCR out of the water. But let's find out. Now this has the AI thing where it detects what type of device or what type of component you plugged into it. I manually set the capacitance so it doesn't have to try to do the calculations. So we'll get a true read for how fast this will actually read it. So here we go. Oh, sorry, that was a fail. The alligator lead didn't get a good grab on it, so let me short it again. Okay, so it's in AI. I'm gonna manually set it to capacitance now. And here we go. Yeah, so Uni-T much faster. Now I would imagine the accuracy on this would be a lot higher. And you know, and that's the thing, it depends on what frequency you measure it at, but I'm really curious what this measures it at. Yeah, 100 hertz probably. So let's leave it at 100 Hertz and see if it changes the read speed at all. Okay, here we go. It's pretty quick. I might have to do a side by side and see which is quicker. So, just one more time, just because of how impressed I am by this, let's do it again. So I just discharged it. That's, if it's not faster, it's really close. That's really impressive, to be honest. But let's not stop there. We have an even bigger cap. It's a Nichicon 4700 microfarad, a big beefy one. And I already discharged it. Here we go. Isn't that crazy how fast that is? So, out of curiosity again, I just have to know. Let's see what the LCR can do it in. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. That's pretty close. I might have to sync them up when I go to cut this, and then we can see which one's actually faster. But that tells you, though, it's really impressive the hardware you get for the money. So, you know, I'm not telling everyone to rush out and buy one of these. If you already have a nice Fluke or Agilent or Bryman, you know, you might not have a lot of use for this, or maybe you will. Maybe it'll be nice to have a cheaper $50 meter that you're not as afraid to do dangerous stuff with, because if it blows up, well, it only costs you $50 versus if you blow up your, you know, your $500 Agilent, you might be a little more butthurt about making a mistake. But yeah, so far I'm really impressed with this thing. And you know, this is coming from someone who has much better multimeters than this. So yeah. Okay, I think the only other thing to measure would be frequency. Now, this is the funny thing. I have an arbitrary waveform generator. It's a pretty nice Rigol one, but it'll only go to 160 megahertz. So I don't even have a way to test this up to the 220 megahertz that it supposedly can measure up to. So I'm just going to go for broke. We'll just go straight for the 160 megahertz that my frequency generator can go to. But obviously, the higher the frequency you set those to, the lower the peak-to-peak voltage maximum becomes. So at the peak-to-peak limit of the 160 megahertz speed, I'm not sure if this will be able to pick up and read it, but we'll find out. Okay, so I have my frequency generator set to 160 megahertz, which is the highest it can go. And unfortunately, the peak-to-peak voltage limit, the amplitude, I can only set it to 2 volts. So I don't know if this will be able to basically get a good count with only 2 volt amplitude, but we're about to find out. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Nope. Let me turn it down to 100 and we'll see. Nope. So this is 100 megahertz at 5 volts peak to peak. So let's go down a bit more so I can get a little more amplitude. Okay, so I have it set to 50 megahertz, and at 50 megahertz I was able to get the amplitude up to 10 volts peak to peak, and it's obviously enough for this to trigger correctly off of and get a good count on. And yeah, 50 megahertz. And not only is it reading 50 megahertz, it's reading it on the dot. So that is really impressive. Which tells me if I had a better frequency generator that let me get more amplitude at the higher frequency ranges, that this would probably be able to read it fine. So 220 megahertz obviously comes, so I wouldn't say it's a gimmick, but obviously it comes with a stipulation. You got to have a high enough amplitude for this thing to read, but still, 50 megahertz, I mean, it'll technically do 220, and I believe it'll do it, but yeah, that blows all the other multimeters out of the water as far as frequency measurement. In fact, the Fluke 87.5 won't even do a megahertz. Well, they don't advertise it to do a megahertz. I think they advertise it something in the hundreds of kilohertz range. So, yeah, the fact that this will do well and like very deep into the megahertz range is pretty awesome. So, yeah. Yeah, it'll do duty cycle. So let me go ahead and turn it down to something a little Well, actually, I'm just curious what it'll say at 50 megahertz for duty cycle. Yeah. They're usually not very accurate measuring duty cycle to really, really crazy frequencies. I'm going to turn down to just 60 hertz and we'll see what it says. Even down at 60 hertz, so that's really impressive and gets another thumbs up from me. Okay, I think it's time to hook this thing up through my bench power supply, and then we can get an idea of how it behaves when the battery gets low, if it gives us an indication of a low battery light, if the reading stays accurate, and yeah, I'm curious to see what it does. Okay, I have it hooked up to my bench power supply. I have it set to 9 volts to emulate this guy. And I have the meter set to voltage, and I am currently, with some alligator leads, have it connected to my 10 volt reference. As you can see, it's reading 10 volts on the dot, which is correct, because you got to see the shot of my bench meter earlier, which is much more accurate, and it showed 10 volts to 4 zeros after the decimal point, which is impressive. And I'm just going to turn the voltage down 100 millivolts at a time, and we'll just see what happens. So here we go. Okay, so that's 8 volts even, still no battery light or anything. That's 7 volts even, still no battery light, and it's still reading correctly. Six volts even, still no battery light, and it's still reading dead on. Okay, battery light came on, let me go back up. So I'm at 5.6, no battery light. 5.5, 5.4. Okay, so 5.4 volts, the little battery indicator comes on in the corner, and I'm just gonna keep going. We're at 5 volts even. 4.6, 4.4, 4.2, 4, 3.8, 3.6, 3.3, 3 volts even, 2.8, 2.6, 2.4, 2 volt, or no, 2.2. Starting to, let me go back up to 3 volts, see if the reading, okay, so this is 3 volts, and this is 2 volts. So at 2 volts, looks like the last digit starts to climb a little bit, which is a little disheartening. I would rather, I mean, we're all the way down to 2 volts. There's nothing left in the battery by the time you get down to 2 volts. So I wish the unit would just shut off. It's not ideal behavior. And looks like somewhere around 2 volts or right below 2 volts it dies. Oh, it even turns itself back on. So 1.9, 1.8. So it looks like, was it 1 point? Okay, so 1.9 will not turn itself back on. 2 volts will, but 2 volts is actually reading out. So I'm not going to count that, because why would you use the meter when it gets to the point where it's not reading accurately? So basically going up until it goes steady back to 10 volts even. So I'm at 2.6 volts, and we'll call that the cutoff voltage. So basically if you own one of these, the low battery light comes on at that point. Well, what do you remember what voltage it came out? Was it 4 point something? If it's 4 point something, that's already to the point where the majority of the battery has already been used, so it wouldn't hurt to just change a battery at that point, so you don't accidentally get down to the 2 volt range where it starts to go out of whack just a tiny bit. So not the best functionality. I would prefer for the meter just to shut off at, like, 4 volts or 3 volts. By that time there's literally just fumes left in that battery. There's no juice, no fuel, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, the low battery behavior isn't perfect, but seems like almost every one of the $50 ones has behaved this way. So, and actually a lot of them didn't have that extra decimal place past the well, it didn't have an extra digit beyond the decimal point, so they'd only have 2 zeros to the right of the decimal point when I was testing this. So maybe the last digit would have been moving at that when it got down to the really low voltages before they shut off. I don't know. This happens to have that extra digit, and we did see it start to go a couple counts out right before the unit shut itself off. So yeah, but either way, I mean it's reading dead on, and it's using the majority of the battery energy in the battery. So honestly, I can't really complain. So what I'm gonna do now is plug this in through another multimeter, and then we'll see what the current draw is, and that way I can come up with what the battery life for this will probably be. Alright, so I got it hooked up through the Voltcraft, and it looks like it's drawing 2.2. I mean, it's kind of jumping around, but it looks like it's right around, you know, it keeps jumping between 2.2 and 2.4, so we'll just average that and just say 2.3. And as you can see, because of the reflections, I had to turn this meter sideways this much, and due to it having an OLED screen, look how crazy the contrast is even at that angle. That's why I really love the OLED displays. Now I know people have had problems with display longevity and all that stuff, and I'm not too concerned about it. If it does go bad, it'll be a fun adventure to try to source a replacement screen and fix it myself, or use that as an excuse to buy a new meter. Obviously, it's not as ideal as just the meter lasting forever, but I'm not too terribly worried about it. It serves a purpose. For doing YouTube videos like this, I mean, you can't get a better multimeter for making YouTube videos with, because you can put it anywhere in your shot at any angle and it's going to show up just like this. It's so awesome. But I'm going to pull up the manual and go look up and see what the auto power off time is on this unit, because I really honestly have no idea. Alright, so I came to find that the Uni-T UT61E actually does not have auto power off. Now, the ASIC supports auto power off, but since this comes with PC connectivity, you see the little symbol over here, it looks like a little computer monitor. The PC connectivity is always enabled, and a part of the way the ASIC works, if it detects that you're using the PC connectivity, it disables auto power off because it assumes that you're doing data logging or something where you wouldn't want the meter to shut off. So unfortunately, that means that this thing won't power off on its own without modifying it. Now, I saw several modifications in the short while that I was, on Google trying to see if this thing had auto power off or not, because the manual didn't show it. It seemed like there's some really easy modifications you can make to give this thing auto power off back. So if you're the hacky type and you want to take the thing apart and work on it a little bit and do some modifications, then it is totally in the realm of possibility to give this thing auto power off, but it doesn't have it. Now, it's not that huge of a deal. The current draw is pretty low to begin with. I mean, 2.2 milliamps isn't too terrible, and even on a crappy 9-volt battery, an alkaline one, it'll do just about 300 hours, and that's pretty good. So considering how cheap you can get the really cheap 9-volt batteries for, it's not that big of a deal. The thing that sucks though is that, to get to the battery in this one, you have to pull out a self-tapper. So that kind of sucks, but yeah, I mean, out of all the good things though, you gotta find a couple bad things, and another slight downside is that it doesn't have auto power off. But I always I'm really big on putting most of my tools and stuff away when I'm done using them, because I can't stand clutter. So I normally put all my multimeters up, and that involves making sure they're all turned off. So I shouldn't say rarely, once in a blue moon, auto power off will save a little bit of battery life for me. But by the time, but it's like, the meter might have run for 20 minutes before I finally realized, oh crap, I left it on, and then I turn it off when I go to clean all my tools up when I'm done with the project. So for me personally, it wouldn't be that big of a deal not to have auto power off. That being said though, I still have to mention it because, well, this is a review, so yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and put all this junk up, and then we will do a summary. Okay, hold on 1 minute. I just found something very interesting, and actually very freaking awesome. So, this unit doesn't have auto power off because the IR PC comms is always enabled, and due to the way the ASIC works, if it's enabled, then auto power off is disabled because you don't want it to turn off during logging. So I thought maybe there's a way with different key combinations or power on sequences that you can disable the PC connectivity. In doing that, I accidentally found a very handy feature that makes this so much better than it already is. So it has a hold button, and if you watch the screen, when you hit it, it just freezes the value on the screen. You see an H up here, and that's how hold works on all cheap multimeters, basically, which isn't very handy. But if you hold the button down until it beeps, and then you touch it to something like my 5-volt reference, for example, and then you hold it, you'll hear it beep again, and look, it's basically touch hold or auto hold or whatever you want to call it, peak hold. Freaking awesome. This might be the cheapest multimeter I've ever seen that has that functionality. So yeah, that's really awesome. And I found that you can't do that on the D model because the hold button is also the backlight button. So if you, obviously to enable it on here, we had to hold the hold button down for a few seconds, and then now it's in the touch hold mode. This one, if you hold the hold button down for a few seconds, it turns on the backlight. So that makes the E model that much better than the D model. But that's actually a pretty big deal, so I had to share that with you because I didn't see that in the manual. It could be in the manual, maybe it's in a different section and I just completely overlooked it, but yeah, that's a really, really, really awesome thing because I think it is the only multimeter out of the $50 shootout that can do this, that can do the touch hold, so I shouldn't call it touch hold, peak hold. Alright, it's time to talk conclusions. So obviously, if you saw my $50 multimeter shootout, or as most people probably did, just went from the first video straight to the conclusion, which I don't blame you. I'm not a huge fan of long videos either. I have a short attention span, so either way, if you did watch any of it, or at least watch a conclusion, you know that while it's hard to just pick an overall winner because you got to qualify what you personally need in a multimeter. If I had to pick one overall kind of a best bang for buck, it would be this one easily. So as you saw, despite being from China, despite being not even $50 shipped, and having the highest specs out of all of them pretty much, it's an excellent meter. The downsides aren't accuracy. Now obviously I haven't had this long enough to know if it drifts at all, but these meters have been out for a good probably 4 or 5 plus years, so there's nothing stopping you from getting online and doing some research and seeing if they do, because maybe they do, maybe they don't. I personally don't know, but what I can tell you though is that right now this meter is dead on with almost everything, and the measurement capabilities and measurement ranges and specs and everything, it's truly impressive what this meter can do for the money. You're not going to find anything in the $50 range that'll be anywhere close to this. The best you can maybe do would be to buy like a used HP bench multimeter. But even then, you're going to have to pay to get it calibrated, and it's not portable like a handheld multimeter like this is. So strictly speaking, handheld portable multimeter, being able to just, turnkey, you pull it out of the box, pop the battery in, turn it on, it's ready to rock. It's really hard to beat this when you're speaking just straight value. Now that being said, in the past they've had a little track record for having some slight sketchy, I don't want to say sketchy. I haven't seen any, I don't think that were quite sketchy. There were just some where they had incorrect package sizes for some of the SMD stuff, and some through-hole stuff that was a little precariously mounted. Just minor little things, nothing like the X-Tech type of stuff you've seen with their PCBs. This is, I would say, is way beyond that. If you've seen teardowns of some of the X-Tech EX series PCBs, it's terrifying, some of the things that people found. And heck, mine had a huge solder blob in it. If you saw my $50 multimeter shootout, you would have seen that, I heard rattling in it, and then later in the video when I finally tore all the multimeters down, I found a huge loose chunk of solder blob that was just flopping around inside there, and that could cause some serious problems, including safety related problems. So I haven't seen anything like that in Uni-Ts. That doesn't mean that someone hasn't. I mean, given a big enough sample size, you're going to find something in at least 1 meter out there. So that being said though, man, this thing is just, it's really, really good bang for the buck. And I I have no affiliation with Uni-T. I bought this out of pocket. I bought all these multimeters out of pocket. In fact, I have not been given or loaned a single multimeter. Every multimeter I've ever reviewed on this channel or you've seen on this channel, I paid with my own money. If you're going to be the average hobbyist and it's going to sit on your bench, then I think this would be a great meter. And as you saw, I set it next to my Fluke 87.5 and it was dead on for, was it the 10 volt and then the 5 volt? This one actually read closer when we compared my reference to the 6.5 digit bench meter that I have. And just everything I measured, it had ridiculously fast auto ranging for resistance. Display update rates kind of average-ish. Seemed to be a little quicker measuring voltage than it was for resistance. Continuity tester is blazing fast, especially if you use nice aftermarket probes. Even with these though, it's plenty quick and works fine. The measurement ranges for resistance, capacitance, frequency is just off the charts compared to a lot of other multimeters. And it includes the handy stuff like manual ranging and relative. I guess I didn't cover peak, but peak basically you hook this up to whatever circuit that you're measuring, whether it's current or voltage, and then you let the reading settle. You push and hold this, and it'll say cal, and then if you push it, you'll have peak max, peak min, and that's basically, it's kind of like the min or max, only this is reading spikes. So as soon as it reads a new high peak max, it'll show it on the screen. And there could be situations where that could be handy, but I guess since I didn't show you, it was, it was worth just showing you what that's actually for. It's not peak hold, unfortunately. If that were a peak hold, kind of like, the Fluke's auto hold, that would have been awesome. So if you have $48 burning a hole in your pocket and you're in the market to get your first half decent multimeter, I think this is an excellent choice, to be honest. And if for some reason in the country you live in you can't get the E model, or the E model costs way more, the D model isn't that bad. They're very similar. The internals aren't the same. If you open up the D model, it doesn't have a precision resistor network. It's got a completely different ASIC in it, and a lot of the stuff's quite different. And it's only 6,000 counts, but you gain a backlight on that one. So there's some trade-offs, but I think it's a worthy second place to this one, assuming that, well, the problem with going to the D is that it puts it kind of really close to the amp probe and the Klein and a bunch of the other ones that I think are actually a lot closer to the D model. But this one is way ahead of those due to the fact that it's 22,000 counts, 0.1% plus 2, with its crazy measurement ranges. And as you saw, almost everything I measured was almost dead on. So yeah, but for data logging, I don't know if, it's a cheap option, but you're gonna have to have like a converter for USB, because obviously it comes with the DB connector. Yeah, this is probably way longer than some of the other ones, but there's just a lot to talk about because this happens to be kind of what I think is the best bang for the buck multimeter for around the $50 range. There are definitely better multimeters out there, and it's not the only option out there, and you have to qualify what you want, but man, I don't think you can go wrong with this one as long as you're sticking to safe stuff. Hopefully that was helpful to someone, or hopefully to many people, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.